Hey guys, check out my new store on Etsy called Nina's Nightly Comforts, where you can find everything from men's t-shirts to women's cozy pajama dresses, men's and women's tank tops for those warm nights, throw pillows, a warm and toasty fleece blanket for those cool fall nights that are yet to come, a mug perfect for tea, coffee, or your favorite beverage, and last but not least, a limited supply of specially handcrafted by me dream catchers to capture all of your nightmares that my creepypastas will leave you with. Everything to get you comfortable and in the right mood to listen to your favorite creepypastas. You can find the link posted below in the description and also in my community tab. And if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to keep me in your nightmares. Charlotte, come on, I know you can hear me, my roommate Raina shouts from her bed as she tosses a pillow across the room at me. I can only faintly hear the sound of her voice through the headphones that are placed over my ears. Annoyed, I rip them off for what seems like the millionth time tonight. What do you want, Raina? Can you please turn off the light? I want to try and at least get a few hours of sleep before my first class starts. Yeah, well, I would have liked to get a couple hours of studying in earlier tonight, but you decided to bring a bunch of your friends over, so I couldn't. Will you lighten up? Live a little. You have almost a week before you have to take your exam. That's still plenty of time to study. Look, just because you like to study at the last minute, if you decide to study at all, doesn't mean that I like to do the same thing. Charlotte, I have to get up at 6:30. It's 2 now. Please. Fine, I reply with an obvious attitude, slamming my books closed. Then I toss her pillow back at her, turn off the light, and plop down onto my bed. As I lie there in the darkness trying to get comfortable, all I can think about is how aggravating it's been trying to find time to study for this calculus exam. My professor told me about it 2 weeks ago, giving me plenty of time to prepare myself. But between going to all of my other classes and keeping up with everything going on in those, plus working part-time as a waitress, I've had to try and squeeze in studying time whenever I can, which hasn't been working out so well for me. No matter what I do, there's just always something going on, or someone around who prevents me from getting it done. Tonight it was my roommate Raina. She brought a bunch of her friends over after she got off work, and of course, they were super loud. And after asking them numerous times to please keep it down because I was trying to study, they just kept brushing me off, laughing and giggling about it like I was joking. Then eventually, I guess Raina finally got the point because she sent them home, but it was already almost midnight when she did. So I only got to study for like 2 hours tonight. Then, the other afternoon, after all of my classes were over for the day, I didn't have to work, so I decided to go to the library and study there. You would think that would be the perfect place to go, but no, not that day, because that's when the company that cuts the grass for the school was outside mowing the lawn and weed whacking, and of course I forgot my headphones that day, and despite me trying my best to block out the sound, I just couldn't. So I finally gave up and went back to my dorm room, only to find out that Raina had her boyfriend over. So then I left and went to the dining hall to grab a bite to eat so that they could have a little privacy. And even yesterday, my calculus professor ended class a little early, trying to be nice and give us some extra time to study. But I couldn't even concentrate and focus because all I could hear the entire time was everyone around me whispering back and forth, comparing notes and study guides. It's really starting to drive me nuts. Did you say something? Raina whispers groggily. I hadn't realized I had spoken out loud. Oh, I was just asking if we're still meeting up for lunch tomorrow. Yeah, and I hope it's okay. I invited Raquel to come too. Sure, it's no problem. Good night, I tell her, as I turn around, slide beneath the covers, and fall asleep. The next afternoon, I meet up with Raina and Raquel at Panera Bread for lunch. When I enter, the place is crowded with people, so I stand in the doorway for a moment, searching for them. I spot the two of them sitting at a table across the room, So I start to make my way over there when suddenly a man standing in line waiting to order catches my attention. Well, it's not really him per se that captures my attention. It's his ears that do. They are oversized and protruding from the sides of his head. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something about both him and his ears rubs me the wrong way. For some reason, my eyes are drawn to him, and I continue to stare until Raina calls my name and snaps me out of my daze. "Hey, I ordered your favorite," she says as I walk over and take a seat, referring to the frozen caramel cold brew sitting at the table waiting for me. "Thanks," I answer, taking a sip. Raquel, a friend of Raina's who I also happen to have 2 classes with this semester, looks over at me and asks, "Is everything okay, Charlotte? You look really tired." Letting out a sigh, I reply, "Yeah, everything's fine. I've just been having a hard time finding any extra time to study." Then with a laugh I add, "I just wish that everyone would shut the hell up and then I could study for as long as I needed." I close my eyes for a second, annoyed just thinking about it, and as soon as I open them again, the man that stuck out to me when I first walked in with the extremely large ears is suddenly sitting directly across from me. He looks a little off sitting there with his legs crossed and fingers laced together, looking polite, yet as creepy as ever. I stare at him, stunned, wondering where Raina and Raquel disappeared to. They were literally sitting there 2 seconds ago, but now it's just me and this man here. Maybe they said that they were going to the bathroom or something, and I just didn't hear them, I think to myself. The strange man sparks up a conversation as I glance around the place, scanning the crowd for my friends. Then when our eyes meet, he says,
"You know, I heard one time before that if you think about something hard enough, you can make it happen."
"What do you mean?"
"I overheard you say that you wished everyone would just shut up. Well, if you think about it hard enough, you could just wish it away. Then you could get all the studying done that you need to. But let me warn you that you may start to hear some things that you might not want to."
Not that I want to talk to this creeper, but what he says does have me a little curious. And then before I know it, my mouth opens and words just start to come out. You know, that doesn't sound all that bad, considering all of the annoyingness that I've been dealing with lately. I honestly would take what you're offering over all of that. With a twinkle in his eye, a massive wide-toothed grin spreads across his face, making his ears appear to be even larger. Instantly chills run up and down my entire body and I shudder. Then he asks,
"Are you sure about that? An echo is always fun to hear, until yours disappears. But careful, paranoia will make you fear that something else is getting near."
"Okay, I've had enough of this guy. And what in the hell is that supposed to mean anyway?" I think to myself, as I start looking around searching for Raina and Raquel again. Then a moment later, when I look back at our table, the 2 of them are sitting right there where the strange man just was. I stare across the table at them confused as they talk about a party that we all just went to last weekend. Finally, I interrupt. "What in the hell just happened? Where did he go?" "What are you talking about?" Raina questions. "That guy. You know, the one with the big ears that was just sitting here." She looks over at Raquel, shrugging her shoulders, then back at me and answers, "Charlotte, I don't know what or who you're talking about, but you're acting really weird. Come on, you guys must have seen him. He was right here a minute ago." Raquel replies, "Charlotte, there was no guy here. You must be smoking something. Hey, have you been taking some of those pills that Billy is selling around school? If so, do you have any left? Because how you're tripping, I think I need some of those." Then both her and Raina start cracking up as they continue to sit there laughing, staring at me like I'm crazy. Finally, I just brush it off, telling myself that maybe I imagined the whole thing. I mean, I have been staying up really late the last couple of nights trying to study, and I am extremely tired. We finish our lunch and then head back to campus. The next morning, I'm awakened by Raina viciously shaking me. I sit up in bed and wipe the sleep from my eyes. Once I open them, I see her standing in front of me, already dressed and ready for class. She's pointing over at my alarm clock sitting on the windowsill. I can hear the faint sound of its familiar annoying beep. Her lips are moving a mile a minute, but I can't make out anything that she's saying. After finally realizing that she must be complaining about my alarm that has obviously been going off for quite some time now, I reach over, turn it off, and apologize. Okay, I'm up. Sorry, I didn't hear it, I tell her, hearing myself speak loud and clear, even though I can't hear her. That's when I glance at the time and notice just how late it is. I thought Raina was getting ready to leave for class, but now I realize that she's actually just returned. Shit, I'm late, I shout as I pull back the covers and leap out of bed. Then I slip on a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, slide my feet into a pair of my flip-flops, toss my books into my backpack, and head down the hall to the bathrooms. I quickly wash my face and brush my teeth. As I run my toothbrush under the water, cascading from the faucet to rinse it off, that's when I suddenly realize that something isn't right. I can't hear the sound of the water running. I know I hadn't heard my alarm go off or Raina talking to me this morning, but when I was able to hear myself talking, I guess I just kind of brushed it off when I saw how late I was. I shoved both my pinky fingers in and out of each of my ears a few times, attempting to unclog them, but it doesn't do the trick. So I brush it off once more for the time being and then start making my way across campus to my next class so that I'm not late. How in the hell did I manage to oversleep and miss not only one, but two of my classes, I think to myself. I mean, yeah, I've overslept and been late before, but never this late. This is just great. I'm going to have so much work to make up. Now I really won't have any time to finish studying for my calc exam. As I continue to walk across campus, I realize when I'm about halfway to the building that I'm headed toward, that I can now hear the sound of a dog barking, but only faintly, like it's miles away. And that's exactly how my alarm sounded when I finally did wake up this morning. I could hear the beeping, but it sounded like it was so far away. As I glance around at the crowded campus, I see dozens of people walking about. Some talking on the phone, others sitting on the grass in small groups, eating, talking, and laughing with each other. But the strange thing is that I can't hear anything that any of them are saying. What in the hell is going on? I whisper aloud, hearing myself perfectly fine, which makes me think, what can possibly be wrong with me if I can still hear myself speaking? I don't understand what could have happened between last night and this morning. I could hear perfectly fine then. Heading to class, I think that this is going to be a very interesting day, trying to listen to my professor teach and take notes when I can't even hear. But what other choice do I have? I can't miss another class today. Just as I'm about to enter the building, I swear that I see the same man that I had a conversation with yesterday when I met Raina and Raquel for lunch. He's standing under a tree, and his unmistakable giant ears are visible, making me certain that it's definitely the same guy. I start to approach him, and when I'm only a few feet away, suddenly the man's face becomes extremely blurry, and then seconds later I'm staring into the eyes of a complete stranger. The guy removes his earbuds from his ears, and when his lips start moving, I imagine that he must be asking, "Can I help you with something?" Embarrassed, I apologize and tell him that I thought he was someone that I knew. Then I sprint away. I make it to my physics class right on time. My professor's just beginning the day's lesson. I find an empty seat and pull out my laptop so that I can start taking notes. Raquel sneaks into class a few minutes late and takes a seat next to me. She smiles as she sits down and says something, which luckily I'm able to read her lips and make out some of it. No, I didn't get a chance to watch it. I was studying for my calc exam. I know it had to have been good, wasn't it? I ask her. She goes on to explain what I assume happened during the previous night's episode of Billions, a TV show that both of us are obsessed with. Good thing I can't hear anything that she's saying, or I'd be kind of pissed that she ruined the episode for me, I think to myself, as I nod my head a couple of times and smile at her so that she thinks that I'm listening. I manage to take some notes during class, but only whatever my professor writes down on the board. I try my best to pay attention, but when you can't hear what's going on, let me tell you, physics can become quite boring, and I end up dozing off toward the tail end of class. Raquel nudges me awake when it's over. "What?" I ask when I see her lips moving. I focus really hard on what she's saying this time and am able to make out half of it. Something about me not taking notes and falling asleep in class, which isn't like me. Then she asks if everything's okay. "I was hoping you could email me the notes. I didn't get much sleep last night. You know, since I was up late studying." She agrees to email me her notes. "Thanks, I owe you one." As I start to walk away, she gently grabs me by the arm and once again asks if I'm sure that everything is alright. I nod my head, but then decide to just tell her what's going on with me. "No, everything's not okay. It's really weird. I don't know what's wrong, but I woke up this morning unable to hear anything except for really loud noises, but even those I can only hear faintly. They kind of just sound like faraway echoes. It's the strangest thing. I can even hear myself talking, but nothing that anyone else is saying." She pulls out her notebook and a pen and then writes, "So you haven't heard anything that I've said to you at all during class today?" With a smile, I shake my head no. Then with an alarmed look on her face, she writes, "Well, why didn't you just tell me what was going on?" I shrug my shoulders. "I don't know. I figured it was no big deal and that I'd go back to hearing perfectly fine in like a few hours." I glance at my watch and tell her, "Look, I have 45 minutes until my next class. I'll just go see the nurse right now." "I think that's a good idea," she mouths. So we say goodbye, then she heads to her next class and I go to see the nurse, hoping that she can figure out what's going on with me. When I enter the student health center, I sign in and sit down in the little waiting area. A few minutes later, the nurse comes out, and I assume she's calling my name because I'm the only one sitting here, so I stand up and follow her to the back. As soon as we're alone in her office, I immediately tell her, "I'm sorry, but before you even start talking, I just want to let you know that I'm not able to hear a word that you're saying. I woke up this morning not able to hear other people talking. I don't know what happened. My ears were working perfectly fine last night." She gets a piece of paper and a pen and starts jotting down a bunch of questions for me to answer. After answering each of them, she writes down that my issue could have been caused by a number of things, such as an ear infection, some type of blockage, or even a ruptured eardrum. I argue, "No, miss, I don't think you understand. I can hear myself talking, and even some other sounds." She stares at me with a puzzled look on her face, then tells me that I should see my family doctor as soon as possible, before whatever's going on with my hearing gets any worse. So I call my primary care physician, and thankfully, the school nurse is nice enough to tell them what's going on and make the appointment for me, but they can't squeeze me in until 2 days from now. I tell her to go ahead and schedule the appointment, even though I think that by then my hearing should be back to normal. At least, I'm hoping it will be. As much as I don't want to miss another class, I decide to just go back to my dorm. On the way there, I text my boss to let him know that I'm not coming into work tonight, and then I decide to try and get some studying time in. I really hate to miss out on work. I desperately need the money. But being a waitress, hearing is a huge priority. I mean, I can't just take people's order without being able to hear properly, now can I? I'd end up getting fired by the end of my shift. I breathe a sigh of relief when I arrive at my dorm and see that Raina isn't there. I know I'll have to eventually explain to her what's going on, but I'm just not in the mood to do it right now. Once I change into my pajamas, I grab some Twizzlers for a snack and a bottle of water from the mini fridge, then pull out my books and notes and start studying. I'm just about to go take a break when someone taps me on the shoulder, scaring the hell out of me. I jump and turn around to find Raina standing there. "Jeez, you scared the crap out of me. I didn't even hear you come in." Then I think to myself, well, at least I was able to study for 3 hours uninterrupted, which is great, because usually I can only cram in about an hour before Raina finishes her classes and shows up. Immediately, she starts talking, but I stop her and explain what's going on. She looks at me confused, probably wondering why I didn't say anything this morning. I assure her that everything's fine and tell her that I have a doctor's appointment in another 2 days. Then before she leaves to head to her next class, she writes me a note telling me to text her if I need anything. Once she's gone, I take a break to go to the bathroom and then order a pizza online. About 20 minutes later, I get a call from the delivery driver, which I don't bother to answer. I just walk downstairs and then out front to pay for my order. As the driver climbs out of the car with a pizza box in his hand, I can't help but to get the feeling that I recognize him. And when he walks around to the passenger side of the car and begins to approach me, that's when I realize where I know him from. Once again, it's the big-eared man. What the hell? Is this creep following me or something? I whisper to myself as he gets closer. But as soon as he gets close enough to hand the pizza to me and take the money, he's now standing right under the light, and as our eyes meet, I can see his face a lot more clearly. And he doesn't look at all like I swear he just did only moments ago. After going back up to my dorm and eating a few slices of pizza, I set the rest aside so that Raina can have some if she'd like when she returns later, and then I get back to studying. After another 2 hours, I decide that should be enough for today and then start working on a paper that's due in another week in one of my other classes. After another 2 hours, I decide that should be enough for today and then start working on a paper that's due in another week in one of my other classes. After another hour goes by, Raina returns, has a couple slices of pizza, and then she sits around watching YouTube videos on her laptop while I lay down to take a nap. For the next 2 days, my hearing problems only get worse. I have to miss all of my classes. Thankfully, my professors are understanding about the matter and email me all of the material that I miss. And instead of just lying around moping, as terrible as the situation is, I use the opportunity to my advantage and study non-stop for my exam that's coming up. Today is my doctor's appointment, which I'm getting ready to head to now. I had to have Raina wake me up this morning because if not, I knew that I would have overslept and missed it. I haven't been getting out of bed until 10 or 11 for the last few days. I've also had to miss work, which I've been really bummed about. And from the text that my boss sent me, he doesn't seem very happy about it either. I told him that once I returned, I'd bring a doctor's note in with me, but he wasn't trying to hear any of that. He told me that if I'm not there tomorrow night, that I can kiss my job goodbye. I grab my jacket and purse, then walk down the street from my dorm to the bus stop and take a seat on the bench to wait for the next bus. 10 minutes later, I faintly hear the sound of its brakes squealing as it approaches the corner and then comes to a stop. I climb the stairs, show the driver my bus pass, and then head toward the first available seat that I see, which just so happens to be right across from a woman and a young girl. The little girl smiles at me as I sit down, so I politely smile back, and then turn my head away from her so that it's no longer possible for her to make eye contact with me, and pretend to be texting on my phone, praying that she doesn't try to talk to me. Because how god-awful and embarrassing would that be, trying to explain my predicament to a total stranger, let alone a child who would most likely think that I was just being a mean person and ignoring them. I breathe a sigh of relief when the little girl and the woman get off at the next stop. But then 4 other people proceed to get onto the bus. 3 of them find seats up front, but one of them walks past me, and then a second later, I feel someone tap me on the shoulder. I look up from my phone, and as soon as I do, my breath catches in my throat as I stare into the face of the man standing before me. The same big-eared man that I've been continuously seeing everywhere I've gone over the last few days. Immediately, I leap up and start backing away from him. One of the other passengers looks at me concerned. I point at the man, and his face flushes as he says something that I'm unable to hear. Just then, my phone vibrates. It's Raina sending me a text. I take a seat behind the driver and quickly respond to her message, and when I look back up, the creepy, big-eared man is gone. But sitting right where he just was is a young guy who looks around my age, and he's got normal-sized ears. Just then, I suddenly realize that I completely missed my stop. I stand and ring the bell, then have to walk a block back to get to my doctor's office. The place is crowded when I enter, so I sign in and then find an empty seat as close to the door where the nurses come out to call the patient's names is, and then I sit there watching it intently. But unfortunately, reading her lips is not as easy as I thought it would be, so I have to pay very close attention to see if anyone gets up each time that she comes out and calls someone's name. Finally, after about the 5th time that she comes out, and this time when nobody stands, I get up, approach her, and ask, "Excuse me, but did you just call Charlotte McKinney?" She smiles and nods her head. "Oh, that's me," I reply, and then she leads the way to one of the rooms in the back. When she starts to talk, I assume she's asking me a bunch of questions because that's usually how every one of my routine doctor visits go. So immediately I cut her off, apologize for doing so, and then tell her what's been going on. She starts typing into the computer that she's sitting in front of at rapid speed, and once she's done, she tells me that the doctor will be right in, which I'm able to decipher again by reading her lips. I thank her and then sit there waiting patiently. A few minutes later, my doctor comes in, reads over the nurse's notes, and then proceeds to check my ears with his little light. Then he begins jotting down some questions on his notepad for me to answer. He asks if I'm having any pain, and I tell him that no, I'm not. Then he asks if I play any sports that could have caused damage to my ears lately, and I tell him that no, I don't play any sports either. I explain that I was perfectly fine the other night, and then I went to bed, and when I woke up the next morning, I couldn't hear anything except for myself talking and sometimes very loud noises, and it's been that way ever since. Next, he writes down that everything looks normal, no swelling, infection, nothing in either of my ears, and then he refers me to an ear, nose, and throat specialist for further testing. I head back to my dorm, feeling a slew of emotions. I'm overwhelmed, upset, and now I'm even starting to get a little worried, not knowing what's going on. I thought for sure that my doctor would be able to determine what was wrong with me. I hope that it's nothing too serious, I think to myself. Just as my mind shifts to the thought of myself possibly going deaf. I've always felt bad for people who were, but now, not being able to hear the way that I used to, I can actually say that I sympathize with them. It's truly the most horrible thing ever, and I hope that's not what is happening to me. Well, I'm sure that there are more terrible things, but this is definitely pretty horrible. On the bus ride back to my dorm, I text my mom and tell her what's been going on. I hadn't said anything to her about it until now because she's such a worrywart and I didn't want to scare her. Of course, she attempts to call me, but I don't answer and then instead send her a text saying, "Really, Mom? Why are you trying to call me? I just told you that I can't hear anything." As I continue texting back and forth with my mom, that's when something hits me. I realized that the day before I lost my hearing, I had been so annoyed that I wasn't able to study that I said, I wished everyone would just shut up. Then that strange big-eared man appeared out of nowhere and said all of those creepy things about wishing it away and whatnot. But that couldn't possibly have anything to do with me losing my hearing. Could it? I laugh to myself and brush off the crazy thought, thinking, yeah, right, that would be something now, wouldn't it? Before going back to my dorm, I decide to stop by my job to pick up my check and drop off a copy of my doctor's note for my boss, hoping that he'll change his mind about firing me. Luckily, he's not there, so I don't have to deal with him face to face. I send him a text letting him know that I stopped by and then start walking the rest of the way back to my dorm. But on the way there, I can't stop thinking about how all I wanted before was just a little peace and quiet so that I could study. But now, the deafening silence that I'm constantly hearing is so overwhelming that it's driving me crazy. God, how I wish that I could hear again. Just as the thought crosses my mind, I see a man standing on the corner. It looks like he's waiting to cross the street, so I can only see him from behind. As I walk closer, I start to see the outline of his body more clearly, and just as I walk up right behind him, the outline of his large ears comes into focus. Startled, I take a step back, and that's when the man turns around, smiles at me with his freakishly creepy grin and says,
"You will get your hearing back, but it won't be your own. Voices you will hear again, which is a costly loan."
Wait, why am I able to hear you speak, but not anyone else? You know what? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I just want to be able to hear again. Please, Anything. Anything but this, I beg. Just then, the light turns red and a crowd of people begin crossing the street, and before I can say anything else, the big-eared man disappears into the crowd. When I return to my dorm, Rain is there and wants to know how my appointment went. I tell her the bad news, then head over to my desk, open my laptop, and schedule my appointment with the ear, nose, and throat specialist that he referred me to online, thinking, thank goodness this is an option nowadays. Rain is getting ready to leave because she has a lunch date with her boyfriend and says that she won't be back until later. I finish up a couple of things for school, and then since my appointment isn't for another week, I decide to go to bed early that night. That way the following morning I can get up and go to all of my classes. I figure I'll just make the best of it and take whatever notes that I can. I leave Raina a sticky note on her desk, asking if she can please wake me up tomorrow at 7 a.m. before she leaves for class. Then I change into my pajamas and get into bed. But no matter how relaxed and comfortable I get, I just lie there in the dark, staring up at the ceiling. After lying there for over an hour, I start to hear a ringing sound, first in my left ear, and then about 20 seconds later in my right ear. Surprised, I sit up and shove both of my pointer fingers in and out of each ear a few times, but the ringing only continues to grow louder. So finally, I just lie back down, cover my head with one of my pillows, and once again try to fall asleep. But the ringing still won't stop. And then just when I get so tired of it that I'm literally about to slam my head into a wall, it suddenly does stop, and then just like before, I go back to hearing nothing but silence. Thank God, I think to myself, breathing a huge sigh of relief. Then I close my eyes once again, and am on the brink of falling asleep when I start to hear something else. But unlike the ringing that I heard only moments ago, this sounds more like someone talking. Actually, no, it's more like whispering. At first, the only thing I feel is an overpowering sense of happiness, because obviously this must mean that my hearing is finally coming back, just like the big-eared man said that it would. But then another thought comes to mind, one that sends a chill right down my spine. Where in the hell are those whispers that I'm hearing coming from? Because I'm the only one here in the room. Quickly I sit up and turn on my lamp, only to find myself covered in goosebumps as my eyes frantically scan the room. The door is still locked, Raina isn't back yet, and there's no one here except for me. So I brush it off, thinking, okay, Charlotte, get it together. First, you can't hear anyone talking at all, and now you think you're hearing things that clearly aren't even here. Not to mention the big-eared man that I swear I keep seeing. I haven't told anyone about it, only because I don't want people to think that I'm crazy, even though that's exactly how I've been feeling lately. I turn the light back off and finally end up falling asleep. The next morning, Raina wakes me up. I guess she got my note. Before she leaves for class, I tell her what happened last night. I was just about to fall asleep when suddenly I heard this awful ringing. Maybe your hearing's coming back, she writes down in the notebook that we've been using to communicate, followed by a smiley face. Yeah, that's what I thought at first too, but clearly not if I still can't hear anything that you're saying to me now. But that's not even the weirdest part. Once the ringing finally did go away, I started hearing voices. Next, she writes, voices with a question mark. Well, maybe the voices you heard was just someone walking down the hallway past the door. I shake my head. No, these voices, they sounded strange. They were really quiet whispers, and then they started to get louder. But when I heard them, it gave me the chills. Next, she writes down, well, what did they sound like? They sounded ancient and distorted. I couldn't make out what exactly was being said. The whole situation was just highly disturbing. It really freaked me out. Yeah, sounds pretty creepy, Raina writes. Then she adds, well, make sure to tell that specialist about it when you go to your next appointment. Yeah, I definitely will, I tell her. After that, I get dressed, grab a granola bar and a bottle of water, then head to my first class. As I'm sitting there, trying my best to concentrate and take notes, I start to hear the same voices that I heard last night in my dorm room. Immediately, I glance around to see if anyone next to me is saying something, but everyone is sitting, facing the professor and the board, focused on the lesson that she's teaching. I tell myself, Charlotte, will you at least try to focus? First you think you've been seeing this weird guy with the big ears following you around everywhere, and then you think you're hearing whispers. Just then, the voices flood my head and become so loud and overpowering that it makes my skin crawl. I push up the sleeves of my sweater and begin viciously rubbing my arms, trying to get the feeling to go away. Then a moment later, I grab the sides of my head and squeeze my ears as tight as I can, trying to get the voices to stop. Raquel, who's sitting next to me, is staring at me with a very worried look on her face. Just when the rest of the class starts to turn and stare, I leap up screaming, "Get out of my head!" as I pound at my ears and then go running out of there, not even bothering to grab my belongings. I race down the hall, not sure where I'm heading. Just as I reach the end of the hallway, I start to feel dizzy, and then everything starts spinning. The next thing I know, I wake up in the nurse's office with 2 paramedics standing right over me. They're shining lights in my face, and I assume asking me questions because their lips are moving, but I can't hear anything that they're saying. I wave my hand in front of my face to shield my eyes from their blinding lights. Then I tell them, "I'm fine. I just got a little lightheaded, that's all. I think it's because I need something to eat." I decline their requests to go to the hospital and get checked out by a doctor, and then once they leave, the nurse has me text Raina to see if she can escort me back to our dorm room. Luckily, she's on her lunch break and hurries over to get me. The nurse explains to her what just happened and says that she thinks it's best if I got some rest. So Raina takes me to go get some lunch and then back to the dorm, and stays with me for a little while until it's time for her to leave and go to her next class. I end up dozing off right before she leaves, and when I wake up from my nap, I see that she's left a sticky note on my laptop that says she'll come right back after class to check up on me. I get out of bed, collect my dirty clothes, and then head downstairs to the laundry room. As soon as I enter, I walk over to the washer, toss my clothes inside, and no sooner do I slam the door to the washer closed, do I start to hear the distorted voices flood my head again, causing my ears to start ringing. I lean forward and cradle my head in my hands, but it provides absolutely no relief. "Please stop," I shout as they get louder. But the louder that they get, it sounds like whatever is making these noises is getting closer, slowly approaching, coming for me. I stand up, wipe the tears from my eyes, and am just about to head back upstairs when I get a feeling like something inside of me is warning me not to open the door. As I stand there trembling, with my one hand tightly gripping the doorknob and my other covering my right ear, I suddenly shout, "This isn't what I wanted. Please, I just want it all to stop." Debating what to do next, suddenly a wave of adrenaline washes over me, and I'm just about to pull the door wide open when I realize something is wrong, and it swings open by itself, slamming into the wall and causing a thunderous boom that I'm actually able to faintly hear reverberate through the entire laundry room. As a gust of freezing cold wind comes swirling through the air straight towards me, I cautiously but quickly begin backing up and then crouch down against the wall in the corner and curl up into a ball. As everything around me begins to shake and rumble, the lights start to flicker and the whispers get so incredibly loud. But despite how loud they are, I still can't make out anything that they're saying. That's when out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of something coming through the door. I slide between the washer and the wall in an attempt to stay hidden a little better, but in a matter of seconds, whatever just came through the door starts approaching me, and once it reaches me, it stretches its long neck so that its face is only inches away from mine, and we're now staring right into each other's eyes. The man's cheeky grin and massive ears are even bigger than I remember. I let out an ear-piercing shriek as his nostrils expand, and I can feel his hot breath on my face each time that he exhales. As I stare into his eyes, his dilated pitch-black pupils seem like they're gazing into my soul. And that's when he says to me,
"All of this can be over in a blink of an eye. You brought it on yourself, 'cause I never lied. So with a crunch and a snap, now you will die."
Then he opens his mouth so abnormally wide that I can't help but to start screaming again. And right at that moment, I recall the first conversation that the two of us had only a few days ago. How he told me that if I wished for something hard enough, that I could make it happen. But he also warned me that there would be consequences, that I may start hearing things that I don't want to hear. And even when I unknowingly asked for his help again, he told me that there would be a steep price to pay. And out of all of the things that I could have ever imagined, I never would have thought that it would have been this. Don't forget to subscribe for new stories weekly. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.